On behalf of the OOIDA Foundation, we would like to welcome you to this session of OOIDA's Business Education Series of online training. This series is the most comprehensive series of business education that has been designed exclusively for the professional truck driver. There are a lot of drivers who are really good at driving a truck, but struggle to make a living in the industry. With these presentations, we're trying to help the drivers who excel at operating a truck understand how to be a successful business person. This education series is intended to help drivers navigate the business side of the trucking industry by providing an accessible and relevant introduction to the management principles of operating a successful trucking business. We would also like to congratulate the thousands of attendees who have taken part in this series. Your overwhelming response has helped to ensure that these programs will continue into the future. This program is being sponsored in part by Trucker Tax Service, Fine Truck Service Incorporated, Aero Truck Sales, DAT Solutions, Road Law, Landline Now, and Landline Magazine. If you're not familiar with these organizations, you should be. These organizations are truly friends of the professional trucker. Please give them your support. All right, let's start this program off by saying right up front, the road to passing a new entrant safety audit can be a pretty rough road, and unfortunately, not everyone completes the trip. If you've got the guts to take on this challenge, we'll teach you the tips and tricks gained from helping hundreds of drivers get down this road successfully. If you're going to go down this road with us, I'm going to tell you right up front, it's going to require commitment and attention to detail and a lot of work on your part. But if you've come this far, it's obvious that you're serious about completing this trip. My name's Tom Gann, and I'll be your host for this program. In this program, I'll be joined by Tom Weekly. Tom is the Director of Operations for the OOIDA Foundations. What Tom and I have done is taken all the steps required to pass a new entrant safety audit and divided them into 5 parts. Each part's going to be approximately 20 minutes in length and filled with a lot of detailed information. Each part builds on the information provided in the previous part. So for that reason, we recommend that you start with Part 1 and work your way through each of the individual parts in order, 1 through 5. And of course, the great thing about online education is you can go back and replay any part of any program as many times and as often as you would like. In this program, Part 4, we're going to be looking at the 6 factors that the auditor is going to be looking at very closely throughout the entire new entrant safety audit. We've got a lot of material to cover, so let's get started. Now, I know we've just spent some time going over these a little bit and talking about them, but is there a place where we can find these? I can read the real rules.
There is, and you need to, one of the things you really need to do is get you a management edition of the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Code of Regulations, Federal Code of Regulations. And I want you to get the management edition. And again, this is one of those things that's perception. You are being looked at to see if you have good safety management systems in place. Almost all of us are required to carry, a smaller version of the FMCSRs, the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Regulations.
Yeah, I've got the pocket version in my truck. Do I need to have a management version too?
As far as there being a requirement, no. As far as being a good thing to have on hand to pass your safety audit, yes. And it's a perception thing. If it looks like I've got the management edition, which is much larger and has a lot more detail, a lot of more questions and answers in it, appendices in it, and so forth, it gives me a whole lot more information. It looks good. I would have that sucker sitting on my desk when that inspector and that auditor came in. I'd want him to see. I would have tabs in it, which I have in mine, and still today, it has what each section's about. So if he does ask me something, or I can say, yeah, I can, I looked that sucker up. I know when I want to look at driver qualification, it's right here. And I turn to that tab and I've got it there. And I always thought it'd be a good idea. I think it's a good idea. Make it look like it's been used a little bit. Nothing worse than a brand new book sitting there that looks like it's never been opened. I want that inspector to think that I've looked through this thing. I've studied this thing. I want to run my business efficiently, effectively, and within the regulations. So I like to have it where it's a little bit, it's got some pages turned down. It's got some notes in it. It's got some yellow highlights in it. It's got some tabs in it. And quite honestly, mine would have that anyway because I do look at it quite a bit. So it's just a good idea. It is a perception thing. You may not look at it that much. It may seem silly to you to have it there. I'm just telling you. When that guy walks in, you got your clean truck outside with everything neat on it. He walks in, you're well organized, you look nice, dressed nice, and again, you don't have to do any of these things, but if I want to impress this guy, I want to put on that I'm a businessman looking to do an efficient, safe operation, I want to look like that kind of person, whoever he envisions that to be. It's doubtful he envisions that to be a guy in shorts, flip-flops, torn shirt, unshaven. That just doesn't fly very well with them. It sets a bad tone. You don't have to do it. Not saying, and I'll agree with you 100%, that has absolutely nothing to do with your driving ability, has nothing to do with your safety or the fact that you're a responsible person. But what I'm telling you is the perception that you give immediately is that you are, if you're dressed nice, look nice, it doesn't have to be a suit and tie, but you're clean, well-shaven, ready to answer questions. You got that big management edition book sitting there with the tabs in it. You got your file cabinet in place, and you don't have to fumble around for anything. Trust me, that's going to make a difference.
Okay. We mentioned that the auditor is going to come in and he's going to want to look at these 16 deadly sins. He's going to want to make sure you've got all these things in place. We've also talked a little bit about perception. He wants to know that you're really a business person and you're taking this seriously. Are there some other things that he's really focusing on or looking for?
Most of them, almost all of them, are looking at, and the 16 deadly sins are part of this. There are 6 factors that they're really looking at. And the 16 deadly sins are part of those, are bits and parts of each of those factors. And in each one of these categories, you have what they call acute and critical violations. Acute violations.
Oh, I get a cute little violation.
Yes, well, you get an acute one, and it's not going to be too acute because an acute violation is something that's pretty serious. It's more serious, whereas, and that's what all the 16 deadly sins are. They are considered to be acute violations. Critical violations are things that they don't consider to be as serious, and so you get a little more flexibility in them, but acute violations are given points, and so are critical violations. And they will, so many points will count against you. So if you have an acute violation, it's 2 points, and in some cases 2.5 points if it's an accident. And in critical violations, you get a point. And so if you have any, if you get 2.5 to 3 in any one factor, and in one of the 6 factors, then, depending on what they are, they will either tell you have to make some corrections, or they'll make your authority inactive. If it's one of the deadly sins, it's immediately you're going to go inactive, and they may or may not allow you to correct that within a certain period of time. And you normally get a certain period of time to correct them, usually 60 to 90 days. 60 days is more common for you to correct it. You need to get it done within 40 or 45. There's a lot of other little things along with that. But basically, that's how it works. And these 6 factors.
Okay, you've lost me a little bit. Let's go through these factors.
Yeah, let's go through them a little bit. The first factor is general knowledge of the industry and the regulations, and they will ask you questions, and they'll have a little checklist. They'll be your basic questions. They're going to want to make sure, for instance, that you know how many hours you can drive, what the normal working day is, how many hours you need to be in the sleeper berth. If you know how, your financial responsibility, those things that were part of the 16 deadly sins, a lot of that, they're just your general knowledge. They're going to want to know that you have a general knowledge of the regulations. That's the first factors that they're looking for. Then they're going to look at the drivers, and they're going to look at the same thing then. Do you understand about the drivers and the responsibility? You yourself have to be, as a driver, or any drivers that you have on you, that you have to run the background checks, that you have to keep those things organized, and so forth. And do you have systems in place to do that, and et cetera. And they may look at your system and say, that system doesn't look like it's going to work very well because of some factor that they come up with. And you go, oh, okay, that's not a thing to argue about. You can say, well, this is the reason I did it this way, but I can see where I could miss out, and from what you told me, so what do I need to do? And in that case, it's a learning tool. That's what they want it for. Say, okay, well, here's where you go, and this is how do you do that. And you say, okay, I'll make sure I do that from now on. Operational controls, that would be things like, okay, you've got a driver who's out on the road and you find out he's disqualified. Now, you knowingly know that he's disqualified. What are you going to do? Do you have some operational controls in place? Or are you out on the road for whatever reason, you get put out of service? What's your plan of action? And you need to have something written down. See, this is what I need to do. This is what I'm going to do. It may be if you've got a driver out there that you've got a plan in place where, he's going to have to sit. Maybe you're going to have a plan in place where you'll pay for his lodging or, whatever it happens to be. Or you've got a number for him to call for repair if it's something that he's broke down with or he's out of service with, or for yourself. Okay, I've got an operational plan for the drivers, and my operational controls are in place. I'm the one in charge. My wife's in charge, or my business manager's in charge, or the office person's in charge. Each person has their level of competency, and they have their particular roles to play. And that inspector, if that's the case, will probably want to talk to them. They're going to say, okay, you're the one that's just going to handle if there's an accident, he says you know how to handle the accident paperwork. That person better be able to answer that and say, yes, I do. We've got this form to fill out. We know we call this number, and so forth and so on. That's my operational controls that I have. And of course the vehicle, and they're going to look at the maintenance record of your vehicles, make sure you've taken care of them. They may go out and take a look at that vehicle if it's there and say, okay, let me take a look at your vehicle and see, is it in good shape? Is it, it's clean, it's neat? They're probably not going to do a level 1, 2, or 3 inspection. They're kind of do a level inspection anyway by looking at your paperwork, but they're not going to crawl all over that truck normally and do that unless it looks like it needs to be crawled all over and taken a look at. If you handle hazardous materials, that's a different factor, and there'll be certain things they'll look for in that. And then, do you have the training requirements? You have show that you're training your drivers or yourself have been through training so that you know how to handle it.
You have to train yourself, don't you?
You have to train yourself. You have to have periodic training on that every year. You have to show every 2 years. You have to show that you've taken a refresher type of course, that you know what you're handling. You may have to have what they call MSDSs, which is material safety data sheets for the different things that you're going to handle. But again, if you have all that in place, it's very, it looks very efficient. It looks important, and it is for you. It shows that you've looked down the road, you've taken time to examine your business, and you're doing everything you're supposed to have. And then the last thing you have is your accident rates. And accident rates also they'll look at your past history, driving history of your drivers and yourself as a driver, and there's a formula that they use for how many miles you've driven. That's the reason you have to keep your mileage, miles you've driven, and then the number of accidents you've had, and obviously that's a ratio. And if you've had enough accidents with the miles driven to go to a certain criteria, then they say, hey, you got to do something with this. And what do you do about somebody who's had accidents? You have to have some controls over that, and that's part of that operational controls. I have a driver who has an accident. He has to take a refresher course in whatever it is. Maybe it happened because he was backing up on, maybe I've got a video for him to proper way of backing up. I mean, those are kinds of things they want to know you have in place to control. Or maybe I had taken myself. Wow, I bumped into something I shouldn't have bumped into, and that's the second time I've done that. I need to look at the video and take a look and see, maybe I'm doing something wrong. Sounds silly, but it really is what they're looking for to see if you have something in place. And again, acute violations, if you have enough of them, and acute, again, are things they consider to be serious, and those would be the 16 deadly sins. All of those are acute violations. There are some that won't put you immediately, and won't automatically make you fail, but they still give you points, 2 points for an acute violation. And critical violations then are things, like I say, that are within that framework. They're not, they're violations, but they say, okay, you probably just didn't understand, or it's easily corrected, and how about if you do it this way, but it's there, and you've made that mistake, and then they add those points up. And each of those factors, the general knowledge of the industry and regulation, drivers, operational controls, the vehicle, hazardous material if you have it, and accidents, especially those first four, that's where they're going to list you under those in acute and critical. In other words, if you have too many of either one of them, but you're allowed a few more critical violations than you are acute violations, they're going to say, hey, you need to either do some kind of a plan to show us how you're going to correct that. That's corrective action plan, or we're going to make you inactive. You're not allowed to operate until you go through the whole process again. You're not fit. You don't have a good safety management program in place.
And boy, if they put you on a corrective action plan, you better take it seriously.
You better take it seriously because they're serious about it.
And you don't really have very long to get that plan in place, do you?
You do not. And that, again, is a little bit flexible to some degree, but you want to get it done within the first 45 days. If you don't, and if you go past the period that they give you, a lot of times they'll give you 15 days, up to 60 days to do it. If you have good reason for it, if you have some mitigating circumstances, but it has to be pretty really good reasons for that, you need to get it done as quickly as you can, because they will let you operate during that time. But they're going to be very suspicious, and you'll probably be pulled over more often because you're going to go in their system as somebody who they're watching, basically. So you want to make sure you get that done as quickly as possible. Bring that inspector back out, have them look at, or maybe they'll allow you to send it to them, your corrective action plan, depending on what it is. You need to sit down and seriously yourself, you need to look at it to see, okay, if they think it's something is bad, you really do need to look at it and say, okay, what am I missing here? Maybe it doesn't appear that bad to me, but it does to them. And most of what they do is based on studies they've seen that show that it can lead to a greater risk of an accident. So you need to seriously look at that, and you need to take it seriously, and you need to let that auditor know you're looking at it seriously at the same time.
It's all perception.
It can be all perception.
Okay, it looks like we're completely out of time. If you've got any questions or comments about this program, or if you'd like a certificate of completion for this program, just send us an email to businesseducation@ooida.com. And don't forget to tell us which program you're referring to. And please don't forget our sponsors, who take educating America's professional truck drivers as seriously as we do. We hope you'll join us online again for additional programming in the OOIDA Business Education Series. This series has been designed to give serious business education to truck drivers who take their business seriously. For information on all of the educational programming provided by OOIDA, visit us at www.ooidaonlineeducation.com. And don't forget, OOIDA has been fighting for the rights of all truckers since 1973. You can join the fight by becoming a member of our organization. Give us a call at 800-444-5791.